Let's bring you back home now, where light aircraft safety is in the spotlight. In recent weeks, we have seen a number of light aircraft crashes. Just this morning, one person was killed after their aircraft crashed near the N14 in Centurion. In January, 2 other deadly light aircraft crashes were reported. What could be behind most of these accidents? Is it a pilot's lack of experience, a lack of aircraft maintenance, or just bad weather? Let's find out from Leitch, who joins me now as editor of the South African Flyer magazine. Mr. Leitch, thank you very much for your time. I'm sure you heard my introduction there to our interview. What could be causing this? It looks like more and more aircraft are crashing, particularly here in Gauteng.
Yeah, hi, good afternoon. Nice to be with you. Well, actually, there is no one single factor that one can blame. And in fact, none of the accidents you mentioned were weather-related, which is often the single greatest problem facing light aircraft activity, because most light aircraft pilots and their aircraft themselves are not equipped or not suitable for flying in instrument meteorological conditions and through cloud and so on. But this time around, fortunately, we haven't had any weather-related accidents. The accident this morning seems to have been mechanical failure. And, you know, when you've only got one engine, I'm afraid there is always the risk of that. I think that there is a problem with what we call pilot currency, which is how much they're staying in practice. There's been, obviously, a lot less flying post-COVID. One of the reasons has been the very high price of fuel. Plus, the weaker rand has made aircraft a lot more expensive to operate. So pilots are not perhaps as experienced as they should have been. One of the key earlier accidents was a training accident. And I'm afraid those also will happen on a fairly regular basis, because South Africa is the flight training business in South Africa is growing hugely strongly on the back of international demand for South African trained pilots. You know, we have great weather, we have high quality instructors, and we've got many flight schools that are now doing almost all their training for international students. There will always be a risk in flight training, particularly advanced flight training, which is what that twin-engined aircraft was doing. And we'll also see spikes, you know, in the number of accidents. They go up, and then you have a relatively quiet period. What I can tell your viewers is that there's nothing systematically wrong with the safety oversight of private or general aviation at this stage.
So what you're mentioning then, when you say that internationally our pilots here in South Africa are very well sought after, then, you know, the problem here is the aviation industry as a whole. And perhaps, you know, just explain to me, if they are so well sought after in the international world, what is it exactly that we're doing wrong, besides the corruption that we've seen at your Denel and SAA, etc.? What are we doing wrong that is making us not be able to keep our pilots here on our country?
Well, yeah, it's obviously the broader socioeconomic picture that we've got to look at. We've got to look at pilot salaries locally, and we've got to look at quality of life. And what with Eskom rolling blackouts and all the other problems, safety and security problems that we have in South Africa, pilots find themselves being attracted to other airlines globally, internationally. There's a massive shortage of pilots, not just brewing, it's arrived in many places. So many South African pilots have been lured to go and fly in the sandpit, as we call it, which is typically the Gulf 3 airlines, or even as far afield as China Airlines and Korean, and in the United States, where the pilot shortage is becoming most strong. The thing about being a pilot is that it's a completely transferable skill. If you're a pilot in South Africa, you can go and fly anywhere else as well. So we do have a problem retaining people. But fortunately, you know, SAA is taking its time about recovery, so we haven't got a pilot shortage yet in this country. And the entire industry is doing pretty well. I need to remind your viewers that actually the airline industry is still by far and away the safest way to travel. You know, it's still the most dangerous part of the flight is still the drive home from the airport. And it's thanks to a really good aviation regulatory regime, which is what we have in South Africa with a world-class civil aviation authority. It regularly gets one of the highest marks from ICAO audits, which is the international standards. So our especially airline traveling public, need have no fears about safety problems.
Yeah, and Mr. Leitch, earlier on you mentioned that, one of the accidents that we've seen are due to a mechanical failure. Is there no way that a pilot, I don't know, maybe because all I can drive really is a vehicle. And, there's signs that are given if the vehicle is going to have a problem as I move. Is there no way that, no warning signs before the pilot is up in the air?
Well, yes. The point is about when you fly in aircraft, especially light aircraft, you can't just pull over to the side of the road if you hear funny noises or things are going bad. We don't know at this stage anything concrete about the accident this morning, except that there seems to have been an engine failure and the pilot tried unsuccessfully to get back to the runway. It's a very dangerous or tricky maneuver that most pilots are taught to go and land almost straight ahead if you lose the engine after takeoff. But very early days to try and guess or speculate on what might have happened there. There are signs, and part of the safety procedures is that all pilots before a flight must do what's called a very thorough pre-flight check. You need to check all the key aspects of the engine before you even start it, and then once you've started it, you need to run it up and check that all the major components there are running, exercise the propeller, check the ignition systems, all of that sort of stuff. If those checks are done properly and the aircraft is maintained properly, there shouldn't be these sort of accidents.
Just lastly and very quickly, Mr. Leitch, seeing aircraft that are, crashing, for instance, light aircraft, I know, that are crashing, for instance, on highway, FNB Stadium, should we not be concerned as South Africans? Will I wake up one day to the sound of a light aircraft crashing into my yard?
Well, I think the problem is that light aircraft crashes make the news, whereas, car crashes don't. But in all honesty, there are relatively few light aircraft crashes. I mean, the number of fatalities has been on a steady decline. That's mostly due to the less and less general aviation flying going on. But the chances of an aircraft crashing through your roof are extremely remote, especially if you don't live near an airport.
All right. Well, thank you so much for speaking to us, and thank you for your time and expertise. That is Guy Leitch. He is the editor of SA Flyer magazine.